Some stories are buried not because they are false, but because they are too dangerous to remember. What you're about to hear was never recorded in any official colonial ledger. No doctor claimed it. No church acknowledged it. And for more than a century, the families who knew the truth agreed on one rule above all others: never speak of the boys. This story begins on a frozen night in February of 1791, in a forgotten settlement along the Ohio frontier, a place called Redwood Hollow. At the time, it barely qualified as a town. Fewer than 300 souls lived there, clustered around a mill, a blacksmith's forge, and a plain brick meeting house belonging to the local Quaker congregation. To outsiders, Redwood Hollow looked harmless, quiet, God-fearing, unimportant. But beneath that meeting house floor was a secret that could have condemned everyone inside to prison, or worse. By the late 1700s, Redwood Hollow had become an unspoken refuge for enslaved people fleeing north from Virginia and Kentucky. This was before the Underground Railroad had a name. There were no maps, no official stations, only trust, silence, and hidden spaces carved into the earth. The meeting house cellar was one of them. It had been dug slowly at night by men who understood that discovery meant death. A trap door lay concealed beneath the speaker's stand. Fresh air flowed through hollow beams disguised as supports. At any given time, a handful of frightened souls waited there, listening for footsteps above. On the night of February 23rd, 7 people were hiding below, and among them was a young woman calling herself Hannah. She said she was 19. She said she had come from a plantation near the Kentucky border, and she was unmistakably pregnant, so far along that Elder Elias Turner, a man who had risked his life sheltering runaways for nearly a decade, knew immediately she would not be moving on anytime soon. What unsettled him wasn't her condition. It was her composure. Hannah spoke carefully, clearly. She carried herself with a quiet authority that made even the elders listen when she spoke. And she noticed things she should not have been able to know. She knew when riders were approaching long before hooves could be heard. She refused food that later spoiled. And more than once she gently corrected people when they lied, even about small, harmless things. "You don't mean to," she told Elder Turner's wife one evening, her voice calm, almost apologetic. But that isn't true. 2 days later, the lie was exposed. The night everything changed began with a warning knock. 3 taps. A pause. 2 more. A man named Jonah, a conductor known to the community, stumbled inside, breathless and shaking. "They're coming," he whispered. Men with warrants, dogs, someone told them about this place. Panic spread instantly. Orders were given in silence. The fugitives were rushed toward a hidden forest passage, all except Hannah. She collapsed at the cellar entrance, and at that exact moment her labor began. As the others fled, Elder Turner's wife and daughter descended into the basement with trembling candles. What they found there would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Hannah did not scream. She did not cry out. She did not panic. She lay still, breathing evenly, listening, as though the danger above was guiding her body. "How many?" the elder's wife asked, terrified. Hannah opened her eyes. 3, she said softly. 3 sons. They needed this night. Before another question could be asked, the first child was born, silent. Then the second, then the third. No cries, no gasps, no sound at all. Above them, boots crossed the meeting house floor. Dogs barked. Men argued just feet overhead. Still, the newborns made no noise. Their eyes were open, watching. Only after the riders finally left did the cellar fill with sound, 3 voices crying together, perfectly in unison. Hannah died before sunrise. Her final words were written later in a private family journal. "They will know what others hide. Protect them. But remember, they are not like us." And with that, Redwood Hollow became the unwilling guardians of something the world was never meant to see. For the first 3 days after Hannah's death, the boys did not sleep. That was the first thing everyone noticed. They lay side by side in a wooden crate, padded with blankets, their eyes open far longer than any newborns should be. They did not fuss. They did not wail. And when they did cry, it was brief, sharp, synchronized, and then gone, as if they were listening for something. Elder Elias Turner recorded every detail in a small leather journal he kept hidden beneath loose floorboards. He had learned long ago that anything unusual was dangerous to forget. "The boys watch," he wrote. "Not like infants, like men waiting." The town women whispered, Some said the children were touched by God. Others said they were cursed. No one said these things aloud inside the meeting house, but fear has a way of leaking into silence. By the end of the first week, something else became impossible to ignore. The boys reacted before things happened. When storms approached, they stirred hours in advance. When strangers passed near the settlement, they became restless, crying softly, turning their heads toward doors and windows long before footsteps could be heard. Once, when a horse threw its rider half a mile away, all three boys screamed at the exact same moment. The screams stopped when the rider was found alive. Redwood Hollow had survived by staying invisible. Now it was drawing attention it could not afford. The elders debated what to do. Some argued the boys should be sent north immediately, hidden with another Quaker family, where no one knew their origin. Others feared moving them would draw even more danger. Elias Turner said nothing. He had noticed something the others had not. The boys never reacted to lies. When a man exaggerated a story, they remained calm. When someone spoke the truth, even an uncomfortable one, their eyes followed the speaker closely. It was as if honesty grounded them. By the time the boys were a month old, they had been given names. Caleb, Jonah, Micah. Biblical names, safe names, names that would not stand out if questions were ever asked. They were raised collectively, moving quietly between trusted homes so no single family bore suspicion. Everyone followed strict rules, no loud play, no visitors near the children, no unnecessary travel. Still, danger crept closer. In late March of 1791, a patrol from Virginia was spotted less than 10 miles south of Redwood Hollow. Officially, they were searching for stolen property. Unofficially, everyone knew what they were hunting. The boys were barely 6 weeks old when the decision was made. They would be moved. At night, under cover of rain, Elias Turner volunteered to escort them to a farm north of the river, owned by a man who owed his life to the settlement's secrecy. The journey should have taken 2 hours. It took less than one. Halfway through the woods, the boys began to cry. Not loudly, urgently. Elias stopped the wagon. Moments later, a shot rang out in the distance, followed by shouting. A patrol had taken the wrong road, straight into a ravine. 2 men were injured, 1 horse killed. The cries stopped. Elias stood frozen, rain soaking his coat, the weight of what he was witnessing settling into his bones. These children were not simply sensing danger. They were responding to it, guiding people away from it. When Elias reached the farmhouse safely, the owner crossed himself and refused payment. "I don't want gold," the man said. "I want distance." Words spread quietly after that, not about what the boys could do, but about what followed them. Near misses, narrow escapes, events that should have ended badly, but didn't. Redwood Hollow remained untouched. For now. But Elias wrote one final line that night, his hand shaking as he closed the journal. If the wrong people ever learn what these boys are capable of, they will not hide them, they will hunt them. And somewhere far to the south, men were already beginning to notice patterns they could not explain. Redwood Hollow survived another winter without incident. To the outside world, it remained what it had always been, forgettable. A cluster of farms, a quiet mill, a Quaker meeting house no one bothered to visit. But inside the settlement, everything had changed. By the time the boys turned 5, it was no longer possible to pretend their abilities were coincidence. They finished each other's sentences. They woke moments before danger. They grew anxious hours before events no one else could predict. And most unsettling of all, they reacted not just to danger, but to intention. When a traveler approached with honest need, the boys remained calm. When someone arrived with hidden motives, they became restless, silent, watchful. Elias Turner aged quickly during those years. Protecting fugitives had always been dangerous. Protecting the boys felt different. This was no longer about secrecy alone. It was about containment. Because secrets have weight, and weight leaves impressions. The first outsider arrived in the spring of 1796. He called himself Dr. Nathaniel Graves, a physician traveling west to study environmental influences on the human mind. He carried letters of introduction, spoke politely, and asked careful questions. Too careful. Graves noticed things others missed. The way the boys watched him, the way the room seemed to settle when they were calm, and tighten when they were not. "You've raised remarkable children," he said to Elias one evening, his eyes lingering too long. "Their awareness is unusual." Elias denied everything. So did everyone else. But denial only works on honest men. Graves stayed longer than planned. He observed. He tested, casually at first. He told stories and changed details midway through, watching the boys' reactions. He asked questions he already knew the answers to. And then he made his mistake. He lied. He claimed he would be leaving at dawn. That night, Caleb, Jonah, and Micah woke screaming, not together, not in unison, each screaming a different warning. Fire, chains, hands reaching. Elias hid the boys before sunrise. Graves was gone by noon. So were his notes. 2 months later, a letter arrived from Philadelphia. It mentioned Graves by name. It mentioned inquiries. And it mentioned interest from men with money, influence, and no interest in faith or freedom. From that moment on, Redwood Hollow was no longer invisible. By 1798, rumors began circulating through frontier towns, whispers of children who could sense danger, of communities that always escaped capture by minutes or miles. Slave catchers noticed patterns. So did investors. So did men who believed God had given them tools meant to be used. The second visitor came not as a guest, but as an ally. A man named William Crowder, claiming abolitionist ties, offered protection. He promised to move the boys north, to educate them, to keep them hidden forever. The boys hated him immediately. They would not speak when he was present. They would not sleep. Micah once whispered to Elias, "He wants to sell what we are." Crowder was turned away. 3 weeks later, Redwood Hollow was betrayed. The patrol came at night, organized, quiet, efficient. This time, they knew exactly where to go. Horses surrounded the meeting house. Lanterns flared. Orders were whispered, not shouted. The boys woke before the first boot touched the step. Elias didn't hesitate. He opened the trap door and sent the boys into the cellar with 2 trusted women and a single instruction. Run when you hear the second bell. The bell rang once, then chaos. Shots, screams, fire catching on wood. The second bell never rang, because Elias never reached it. By dawn, Redwood Hollow was burning, and the boys were gone. Not captured, not dead, vanished into the wilderness with no tracks left behind. For years, no one knew where they went. Only one thing was certain. The world had noticed them, and it would not stop looking. For nearly 7 years after the burning of Redwood Hollow, the boys did not officially exist. No names appeared in records. No births were logged. No sightings confirmed. Yet across the frontier, something strange began happening. Slave patrols rode into ambushes that hadn't been set. Militias arrived at towns already abandoned. Ships carrying human cargo were delayed by storms that came out of nowhere. Men who trafficked in certainty began to fear coincidence. Caleb, Jonah, and Micah were growing, and they were learning. They had fled north through forest and marsh with the help of strangers who never gave their names. People who seemed to know when to open doors and when not to ask questions. By 1805, the boys were living in a place that did not appear on any map. It was called Havenridge. Officially, Havenridge was nothing more than an abandoned ironworks deep in the Allegheny foothills. Rusted structures, broken chimneys, a failed venture written off decades earlier. But beneath the ground lay something else. A network of stone corridors, reinforced rooms, hidden exits carved into the hillsides, and people who understood exactly what the boys were. They called themselves the custodians. They were not a church, not a government, not abolitionists, at least, not in the way others used the word. They believed the boys were instruments, rare ones. The custodians had been watching patterns for years, escapes that defied probability, failures that occurred minutes too late, routes that always shifted at the right moment. They didn't know why, until they found the boys. At Havenridge, Caleb learned to read intention, not words. Jonah learned to focus, narrowing his awareness to specific outcomes. Micah learned something darker. He learned to push, to influence probability instead of just sensing it. The custodians encouraged this. They ran tests disguised as lessons, presented moral dilemmas framed as necessity. When a choice resulted in suffering, they called it balance. You save many by losing one, they said. The boys argued. Often, Caleb wanted to warn. Jonah wanted to hide. Micah wanted to act. And the world beyond Havenridge was changing. By 1812, America was at war again. Chaos made opportunity. Havenridge became valuable. Routes were planned using the boys' insights, raids avoided, captures prevented. But something else began happening. Men started asking where the knowledge came from, and men with power do not tolerate mysteries they do not control. The first attempt to seize Havenridge came quietly. A survey team arrived with forged papers. Military interest, they claimed. Strategic assessment. The boys knew before they reached the valley. Caleb felt pressure in his chest. Jonah couldn't sleep. Micah tasted metal in the air. That night, Havenridge evacuated itself. When soldiers arrived, they found empty halls and extinguished lamps. But the second attempt was louder and faster. This time, it came with authority and betrayal. One of the custodians, a man named Edwin Cross, believed the boys were being wasted. He contacted officials, offered cooperation, promised results. "They're not children," he said. "They're assets." By the time Caleb realized what Cross had done, it was too late. Micah had already seen the outcome. "They're going to put us in rooms," he said quietly. "And they won't let us leave." The boys fled again. But the world was smaller now. More roads, more records, more men hunting patterns. Havenridge was abandoned by morning. And for the first time since their birth, the boys were truly alone, because the people who wanted to protect them were gone, and the people who wanted to use them were very close.